A heart of gold in a small-town diner. The morning rush at Rosie's Diner was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of sizzling bacon, freshly brewed coffee, and syrup-drenched pancakes. Emma Carter, a young waitress with tired eyes and an unwavering smile, weaved between tables, balancing plates stacked with eggs and toast. The ding of the kitchen bell signaled another order ready to go, and without missing a beat, she grabbed the steaming plate and delivered it to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the elderly couple who had been coming to the diner for as long as she had worked there. "Here you go, Mr. Johnson. Your blueberry pancakes and extra crispy bacon," she said with a warm smile before turning to his wife. "And for the lovely Mrs. Johnson, a veggie omelette with extra cheese, just how you like it." The older woman beamed. "Thank you, dear. You always remember." Emma tucked her notepad into the pocket of her apron. "How could I forget? You two brighten my mornings." She wasn't just saying that. The Johnsons had been like surrogate grandparents to her, always asking about her nursing school dreams, always tipping generously despite their limited retirement budget. Their kindness meant everything to Emma, especially now, when she felt like her life was balancing on a razor's edge. As she turned to head back to the counter, Emma noticed a young family of four sitting in the corner booth. The mother, a woman with dark circles under her eyes, was trying to soothe a fussy toddler while glancing nervously at the menu. The father, shoulders hunched, was discreetly counting the change in his pocket, his lips moving as he calculated. Emma's heart clenched. She knew that look all too well. It was the look of someone trying to stretch a dollar further than it was meant to go. She approached the table with her best friendly smile. "Hi there, can I get you folks started with some coffee?" The mother hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, please. That would be wonderful." Emma poured the coffee and watched the parents whisper to each other in hushed tones. Their eyes darted to the prices on the menu, their fingers tightening around their coffee cups. "You know," Emma said softly, leaning in as if sharing a secret, "our lunch special today is really filling and a great deal. It comes with soup, a sandwich, and a slice of pie. Perfect for sharing." The father looked up, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "That sounds good. We'll take that, please." Emma nodded, scribbling the order down. As she turned toward the kitchen, her mind raced. They didn't order anything for the kids. Back behind the counter, she glanced at the tip jar, the one she had been carefully filling, penny by penny, for her nursing school fund. It wasn't much, but it was something. Every dime counted. But what kind of nurse would she be if she ignored a family in need? Taking a deep breath, she made up her mind. "Hey, Jimmy," she called to the cook behind the grill. "Can you add 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and a bowl of fruit to the order? Just say it's on the house if anyone asks." Jimmy, an old-timer with a bushy gray mustache, gave her a knowing look but didn't argue. "Got it, kid." When the food was ready, Emma delivered it with a bright smile. "Here you go, folks. Enjoy your meal. And don't worry about the pie. It's on the house today. We had a few extra slices that needed eating up." The mother's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to us." As she walked away, Emma discreetly slipped a few folded bills from her tip jar into the check sleeve. It wasn't much, but it would cover the meal and leave them a little extra. Her nursing school dreams might have to wait a little longer, but as she watched the family eat, saw the tension melt from their faces, she knew she had made the right choice. A secret gift and a mystery customer. Later that afternoon, the diners began to thin out, and Emma was finally able to take a quick break. She leaned against the counter, rubbing her aching feet, when she noticed a man in a suit step into the diner. He was older, with neatly combed silver hair and an air of quiet dignity. His simple but impeccably pressed suit suggested a man of means, but his warm brown eyes lacked the cold indifference of the wealthy businessman Emma had served before. He took a seat by the window, and Emma grabbed a menu before approaching him. "Welcome to Rosie's Diner, sir. Please sit wherever you'd like." The man smiled. "I'll just have some water for now. Thank you." As Emma brought him a glass, she noticed that he wasn't looking at the menu. Instead, his sharp eyes were observing her, watching the way she stopped to chat with the Johnsons, the way she slipped a little extra jam onto a child's plate with a wink, the way she lingered near the young family she had helped earlier. "Not very hungry today?" she asked, noticing that he hadn't ordered. He shook his head. "Oh, this is quite enough for me, dear. But tell me, how has your day been?" Emma blinked, surprised by the question. Customers rarely asked about her. "It's been busy," she admitted with a small laugh. "But a good day. You know, sometimes the simplest things can make such a big difference in someone's day." The man nodded thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful perspective, Emma." Her name sounded warm coming from him, as if he had known her for years. She returned to her work, but every now and then, she caught the man watching her, a small smile playing on his lips. Finally, after finishing his water, he left without ordering anything more. It wasn't until 15 minutes later that Emma returned to his table to clear it. That's when she saw it. A folded napkin placed neatly beneath the empty glass. Frowning, she picked it up and unfolded it. Her breath caught in her throat. There, written in elegant handwriting, was a simple note. "Dear Emma, your kindness and compassion have touched my heart. In a world that can often be cold and indifferent, you shine as a beacon of hope. Please accept this gift as a token of my appreciation. Use it to pursue your dreams and to continue spreading kindness in whatever way you see fit. The world needs more people like you. Sincerely, Mr. James Thompson." Emma's hands trembled as she turned over the note. Tucked inside was a check. She stared at the numbers. Her knees nearly buckled. $1 million. Her mind reeled, her heart pounded. This had to be a mistake. $1 million. For her. Emma clutched the check to her chest, her breath coming in short gasps. She looked toward the door, hoping, praying, to see Mr. Thompson still standing outside. But he was gone. The life-changing decision. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the check, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the diner's chatter. $1 million. $1 million. She blinked rapidly, as if her vision was playing tricks on her, but the numbers remained the same. $1 million. She had never seen so many zeros in her life. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. Could this be real? Could this actually be happening? The diner blurred around her as she swayed on unsteady legs. She stumbled back into the empty booth, gripping the check and the note tightly in her hands. "Emma?" She barely registered the voice at first. It wasn't until Jimmy, the diner's cook, crouched down next to her that she realized he had been talking to her. "Emma, what's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost." His gruff voice was tinged with concern. Emma turned her wide, tear-filled eyes to him and thrust the check and the note into his calloused hands. Jimmy frowned and adjusted his reading glasses before scanning the note. His jaw went slack, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head as he reached the number at the bottom of the check. "Holy!" He sucked in a sharp breath and looked at Emma. This is real." Emma let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh. "I don't know. Is it?" Jimmy turned the check over, feeling the texture, holding it up to the light, as if expecting it to vanish before his eyes. He let out a low whistle. "Well, kid, if this is a joke, it's the best damn forgery I've ever seen." Emma covered her mouth with her hands. $1 million. It was life-changing. It was everything. But it was also terrifying. Her mind raced with questions. Why her? What did she do to deserve something like this? Was this a mistake? She had to find Mr. Thompson. She jumped to her feet, ignoring the curious glances from the other customers. Bursting through the diner doors, she scanned the street frantically. Nothing. The street was bustling, but Mr. Thompson was gone. Disappointment and disbelief crashed over her. How could he just disappear? She spun back toward the diner, gripping the note in her hands like a lifeline. Maybe he left a contact number, a forwarding address. But no, there was only his name. Mr. James Thompson. She swallowed hard. Who was he? And why had he chosen her? Fear and doubt. That night, Emma sat on her tiny apartment couch, the check and note laid out on the coffee table in front of her like they were radioactive. Her roommate and best friend, Sarah, sat cross-legged on the floor, still in her scrubs from her shift at the hospital. Sarah had been working as a nurse for 2 years, the very dream Emma was still desperately clawing toward. Sarah read the note for the 10th time before finally shaking her head and exhaling. Emma, this is insane. Like life-altering, crazy insane. Emma rubbed her temples. Tell me about it. Sarah leaned forward, resting her arms on her knees. Okay, let's think this through. You said this guy didn't act suspicious. He wasn't like some creep or scam artist. Emma shook her head. No, he was kind, polite. He barely even ordered anything. He just watched, like he was studying me. Sarah pursed her lips. That's not weird at all. Emma groaned and flopped back against the couch. I know how it sounds, but I swear it didn't feel bad. It felt warm, like he already knew me somehow. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then, with a soft sigh, she asked, Do you think it's real? Emma chewed on her lower lip. I don't know. I mean, I should go to the bank and find out. Right. Sarah nodded. First thing in the morning. Emma's stomach twisted with anxiety. What if it was a mistake? What if it bounced? What if it was real, and she suddenly had $1 million to her name? The thought of it made her feel overwhelmed. All her life, money had been the thing that kept her chained down. She had worked 3 jobs just to get through high school. She had taken extra shifts to save for community college. She had watched her mother break her back working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Now someone was just giving her $1 million. It didn't make sense. The bank visit. The next morning, Emma's stomach twisted into knots as she sat across from the bank manager, a neatly dressed woman with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression. Emma had half expected security to be called the moment she handed over the check. But instead, the woman had nodded, typed something into the computer, and then went silent as she stared at the screen. Emma's heart thundered in her chest. The woman finally looked up. Miss Carter, this check is real. Emma's breath hitched. You mean? It's been verified. Mr. James Thompson is a highly reputable businessman and philanthropist. The funds have already been processed. The money is yours. Emma felt like she might faint. The bank manager smiled at her stunned expression. It's not every day someone gets an anonymous donation of this size. Would you like to transfer some of it into a savings account? Emma couldn't speak. She could only nod. As she walked out of the bank, she clutched the receipt that confirmed the funds were now in her name. $1 million. It was real. What do you do with a miracle? For the next week, Emma's life became a whirlwind of emotions. She barely told anyone. Only Sarah and Jimmy knew. She spent every night writing lists. Pay off her mother's debt. Get out of her tiny, broken-down apartment. Nursing school. That was the biggest thing. This money could finally make her dream a reality. No more long shifts at the diner. No more worrying about tuition. She could finally become the nurse she had always wanted to be. But something nagged at her. Why her? Had Mr. Thompson seen something in her? Had he known about her struggles? She wanted answers. So she started digging. The search for Mr. Thompson. Emma scoured the internet for hours, typing in every combination of James Thompson and philanthropist she could think of. Nothing. No photos. No recent news articles. No public records of donations. It was as if he didn't exist. Frustrated, she took a different approach. She asked around town, dropping his name casually with the regulars at the diner. A few people recognized the name, but only in passing. Thompson. Oh, I think he used to own some businesses in the city. Pretty sure he retired years ago. Nice fella. Kept to himself, though. Emma was no closer to understanding why he had chosen her. But one thing became clear. This wasn't random. Mr. Thompson had come into her life for a reason, and Emma wasn't going to waste the gift he had given her. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the nursing school application she had been staring at for weeks. With steady hands, she filled it out. And just like that, her life changed forever. The cost of dreams. Emma had always imagined this moment, sitting at her small wooden desk, filling out her nursing school application with a sense of purpose. But now, as she scribbled in her personal information, her hands trembled. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. With $1 million sitting in her bank account, her future was suddenly limitless. She could enroll in the best nursing program, buy the books she needed, and even have a safety net for living expenses. But the money, instead of bringing her peace, felt heavy. For so long, she had learned to struggle, to fight for every penny. She was used to surviving. What did it mean to suddenly have enough? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. Sarah, did you send the application yet? Emma exhaled. Not yet, but I will. She stared at the blinking cursor on the screen where the application essay began. Why do you want to become a nurse? She had asked herself that question 100 times. She could write about growing up watching her mother work long hours as a caregiver, barely making ends meet. She could talk about how she had always wanted to help people, how she felt at home in the clinic, caring for strangers like they were family. But her mind kept going back to Mr. Thompson. She had never been given a reason why he chose her. But maybe that was the answer. Maybe kindness didn't need a reason. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. I believe kindness is the most powerful medicine. Growing up, my mother taught me that you don't have to have a lot to give a lot. Even when we had nothing, she made sure someone else had something. I want to become a nurse because I know what it feels like to be helpless. I want to be the kind of nurse who makes people feel safe. I want to give hope to those who feel like the world has forgotten them. One small act of kindness changed my life, and I want to spend my life doing the same for others. Her chest felt lighter as she clicked submit. She had finally taken the first step. $1 million and a $20 tip. The next morning, Emma walked into Rosie's diner like she had for the past 4 years. The bell above the door jingled. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and the sounds of silverware clinking against plates created a rhythm she knew by heart. But something had changed. She wasn't supposed to be here anymore. She had enough money to never work another shift in her life, but the thought of just walking away didn't sit right. So she did what she always did. She tied on her apron and got to work. Morning, Emma. Jimmy grunted from behind the grill, flipping pancakes with his usual gruffness. Thought you'd be long gone by now, Miss Millionaire. Emma rolled her eyes as she grabbed a pot of coffee. Very funny. I still have to work, you know. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. You don't have to. You just don't know how to quit. He wasn't wrong. Emma loved this diner. She loved the people, the chaos, the routine. She had spent years perfecting her balance between hot plates and cold coffee refills, memorizing every regular's order and learning the stories behind every face that walked through those doors. She wasn't ready to let go just yet. Besides, she added with a smirk, who else is going to make sure you don't burn the bacon? Jimmy chuckled. Yeah. Just don't let the money turn you soft, kid. Emma didn't think money could ever change her, but she was about to learn that money had a way of changing the people around you. That afternoon, a young waitress named Lily, new to the diner, barely out of high school, approached Emma nervously. Hey, I just wanted to say, I think it's really cool that you're still working here even after, you know. She hesitated. The whole mystery check thing. Emma blinked. How do you know about that? Lily bit her lip. I heard Margaret talking about it with some customers. Emma clenched her jaw. Margaret, another waitress, had been working at Rosie's forever, and she was not the kind of person to keep juicy gossip to herself. Emma sighed. Yeah, well, it's just money. Lily shook her head. No, it's not. It's hope. That's what people are saying, anyway. That someone good finally got something good in return. Emma wasn't sure how to feel about that. As the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching her differently. Some people looked at her with admiration, some with curiosity, and some with jealousy. Margaret, in particular, had been cold toward her all day, barely speaking, only giving her short nods when necessary. It came to a head when Emma went to grab her tips at the end of her shift. She found a single $20 bill sitting in her cup. Frowning, she glanced at the others. Margaret, Jimmy, and Lily all had stacks of small bills and change. Emma narrowed her eyes. Where's the rest of my tips? Margaret crossed her arms. You don't need them. Emma's breath caught. Excuse me? You have $1 million sitting in the bank, Emma, Margaret said, her tone sharp. Do you really need to take a few extra bucks from the rest of us? Emma's stomach twisted. It's not about needing it, Margaret. It's about the principle. Margaret scoffed. The principle? You want to talk to me about principles? The diner went silent. All eyes were on them. Margaret's voice shook with frustration. You used to be one of us. You understood what it was like to scrape by, to count every damn dime just to make rent. But now, you're different. You can walk away from all of this, and the rest of us. We're still stuck here. Emma felt like she had been punched in the gut. I never said I was leaving, she whispered. Margaret scoffed. And why would you stay? Just to make yourself feel better? Emma opened her mouth to argue, but she didn't have an answer. Why was she staying? She didn't belong here anymore. But she also didn't know where she belonged. Without another word, she grabbed the single $20 bill, stuffed it into her pocket, and walked out the door. The money had changed everything, and Emma had no idea what to do next. A decision to give back. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emma made a decision. She wasn't just going to use this money for herself. She was going to pay it forward. The next morning, Emma walked into the diner with a plan, and she was about to make an announcement that would shock everyone. Paying it forward. Emma sat at her small kitchen table, her coffee growing cold as she stared at the numbers on the screen. $1 million. It was surreal seeing it sitting in her bank account. The money felt less like a gift and more like a challenge. Margaret's words from the night before still rang in her head. You used to be one of us. You can walk away from all of this, but the rest of us, we're still stuck here. Emma clenched her jaw. Margaret wasn't wrong. She had spent her whole life struggling, and now, for the first time, she had a way out. But something inside her refused to just take the money and disappear. Mr. Thompson had chosen her for a reason, and she was going to find out what that reason was. The announcement. The morning shift at Rosie's diner was just getting started when Emma walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual apron. She wasn't here to serve coffee or clear plates. She was here to change lives. Jimmy was behind the grill, flipping pancakes like always, but the tension in the diner was thick. People whispered as she walked by. Margaret barely looked at her. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Then she stepped onto the counter, standing above the murmuring customers and shocked employees. Hey, everyone, she called out. Can I have your attention for a second? The diner fell silent. Emma looked around at the faces she had known for years. Some were kind, some curious, some suspicious. I know that a lot of you have heard about the money I received, she began, her voice steady. And I get it. It's weird. It doesn't make sense to me either. A few people chuckled, but most remained quiet, waiting for her to continue. I didn't ask for this. I didn't expect this. But now that I have it, I don't think I can keep it all to myself." Margaret scoffed. "What are you saying, Emma? You gonna hand out stacks of cash to everyone here?" A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the room. Emma smiled. "Not exactly. But I am going to use it to help people who need it most." She took a deep breath. This was it. "I'm starting a scholarship fund," she announced, "for anyone in town who wants to go back to school but can't afford it. Nursing school, trade school, community college, whatever it is, if you want a better future, I want to help you get there." The room was dead silent. Then a voice from the back. "You're serious?" Emma turned and met Lily's wide-eyed gaze. "Dead serious," she said. "People helped me when I needed it. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." A murmur spread through the diner. Some people nodded in approval, some whispered in disbelief. Margaret, arms still crossed, gave her a long, unreadable look. Finally, she muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." The first applicant. Later that afternoon, as Emma sat in one of the empty booths, sipping coffee and going over the details of how to set up the fund, Lily slid into the seat across from her. "So, when you said anyone who wants to go to school," Lily trailed off, twisting the hem of her apron. Emma raised an eyebrow. "You interested?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. "I've always wanted to be a teacher. But college, it's never been an option." Emma felt her heart swell. "It is now." Lily swallowed hard. "I don't want a handout, Emma. I'll pay it back someday." Emma reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to. Just promise me this. When you're in a position to help someone else, you will." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I swear." A town transformed. Word about Emma's scholarship fund spread like wildfire. Within a week, she had over a dozen applicants, single parents trying to go back to school, young adults who had given up on their dreams, even a few older workers looking to learn a new trade. Emma didn't just give out money. She helped people apply for grants and financial aid they never knew existed. She found local businesses willing to match her funds. She even started a community mentorship program, pairing students with professionals who could guide them. People noticed. One day, a man in a suit walked into the diner and introduced himself. "Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Hartley. I run a local charity, and I think we can help each other." Emma shook his hand, her mind racing. Mr. Hartley explained that his organization funded education initiatives. "Your scholarship is exactly the kind of thing we look for," he said. "If you'll let us, we'd like to partner with you. Expand your reach. Help more people." Emma's jaw nearly dropped. "You're serious?" "Very," he said. Within 2 months, the scholarship had grown. What started as Emma giving away part of her own money became a fully funded program with sponsors, volunteers, and a future. Emma wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was changing lives. A letter from Mr. Thompson. Late one evening, after a long day of work, Emma returned home to find an envelope in her mailbox. It had no return address. Her breath hitched as she opened it. Inside was a letter. "Dear Emma, I've been following your journey, and I want you to know, I'm proud of you. When I gave you that check, I wasn't just giving you money. I was giving you a choice. Some people, when given great fortune, use it only for themselves. But I knew you wouldn't. And you didn't. Your scholarship fund is only the beginning. Keep going. Keep helping. Keep believing in the power of kindness. I may be in the shadows, but I am watching. And I couldn't have chosen a better person. With admiration, James Thompson." Emma read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Mr. Thompson had known all along. This was never about the money. It was about who she was, and who she was meant to be. Taking a deep breath, Emma wiped her tears. Because she knew now, without a doubt, her story was just beginning. Building a legacy. Emma sat at her kitchen table, staring at Mr. Thompson's letter for what felt like the 100th time. I may be in the shadows, but I am washing. His words weren't just encouragement. They were a reminder. This was bigger than her now. The money, the scholarship, the lives she was changing. It had all started because one man saw something in her, and she wasn't going to waste it. A town rallies behind her. The next morning, Emma woke up with a mission. She wasn't just going to fund education. She was going to change the way people in her town thought about opportunity. She met with business owners, community leaders, and even local government officials. She pitched the idea of not just scholarships, but free skills training, mentorship programs, and career placement services. At first, there was skepticism. "That's a big dream, Emma," said Mr. Carter, the owner of the hardware store. "You really think you can pull it off?" Emma didn't hesitate. "I know I can, but I need help." And help came. A local law firm volunteered to offer free legal consultations to people trying to start their own businesses. The community college partnered with her to provide training courses at reduced costs. Employers started offering internships to scholarship recipients. Before long, what had started as a simple scholarship fund became a full-fledged community development program. And Emma, she was no longer just a waitress. She was a leader. Margaret's change of heart. Emma had expected resistance, but what she hadn't expected was for Margaret, the same woman who had once accused her of turning her back on them, to approach her one evening as she was leaving the diner. Margaret stood by the door, arms crossed, but her usual sharpness was gone. "Hey," she muttered. Emma stopped, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. "Hey." Margaret shifted awkwardly before sighing. "Look, I owe you an apology. I was angry, and I took it out on you." Emma's lips parted slightly. "Margaret, you don't." "No, let me finish," Margaret interrupted. "You're doing something incredible, and I was too proud to admit that I was jealous." Emma blinked. "Jealous?" Margaret gave a dry laugh. "I've worked at this diner for 30 years, Emma. I never got the chance to go to school, never had the luxury of thinking about dreams. And then, you come along, and suddenly, you have all these options. It made me feel, I don't know, stuck." Emma felt her heart ache. She had spent so much time thinking about what she could do with the money, but she had never stopped to consider how it made others feel. "I don't want to feel stuck anymore," Margaret admitted. "Do you think someone like me could still go back to school?" Emma smiled, her eyes shining. "Margaret," she said warmly, "someone like you is exactly who this program is for. Expanding the mission." Within a few months, Emma's initiative wasn't just helping students, it was transforming entire families. Parents went back to school. High school dropouts got their GEDs. People who had given up on their dreams found new paths forward. One evening, after another long day of organizing applications and meeting with community leaders, Emma sat on her couch, scrolling through emails from scholarship applicants. Her inbox was overflowing. People from outside her town had heard about what she was doing and wanted to apply. She had two choices: keep it small, focus only on her local community; expand, reach even more people, but risk spreading herself too thin. Emma already knew what she was going to do. She picked up her phone and called Richard Hartley, the philanthropist who had originally helped fund her program. "Mr. Hartley," she said when he answered, "I want to take this further." There was a pause, and then a chuckle. "I was wondering when you'd say that, Emma. Tell me what you need." The interview that changed everything. A few weeks later, Emma sat in a television studio, a microphone clipped to her blouse. Across from her sat Diane Reynolds, one of the most well-known journalists in the country. "You've been called the woman who turned $1 million into a movement," Diane said with a smile. "How does that feel?" Emma laughed softly. "Overwhelming, but also humbling. I don't see this as just my story. This is the story of every single person who has been given a second chance." Diane leaned forward. "Tell me, Emma, if you could say one thing to the man who gave you this gift, Mr. Thompson, what would it be?" Emma felt her throat tighten. She turned to the camera, knowing that somewhere he was watching. "I would tell him. Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for the money, but for believing in me before I even believed in myself." She took a breath and smiled. "And I hope I'm making him proud." A new beginning. By the time Emma walked out of the studio that night, she wasn't just a waitress who had gotten lucky. She was the founder of a national movement. More people came forward to support her cause. More students, workers, and families got the help they needed. And one day, Emma received a final letter from Mr. Thompson. "Dear Emma, I always knew you would do something extraordinary. You have. The world is better because of you. Keep going. With admiration, always. James." Emma held the letter against her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had no idea where Mr. Thompson was, but she didn't need to, because she knew, deep in her heart, he had given her a miracle, and she had turned it into a legacy, turning a spark into a fire. Emma never could have imagined how quickly her life would change after that interview. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails flooded her inbox from students, parents, business owners, and journalists wanting to know more about her scholarship program. Some wanted to donate. Others wanted to volunteer. A few even asked how they could start their own programs in different towns. And then the biggest call came. "Miss Carter, this is Ellen DeGeneres' team. We'd love to have you on the show to talk about your work." Emma nearly dropped her phone. She had seen people's lives change overnight on that show. But her, sitting on a national stage, talking about her small-town program, it felt surreal. But she said yes, because if this was going to grow, she had to take the leap. The moment that changed everything. A week later, Emma was sitting under the bright lights of the Ellen show, her hands clenched together in her lap. The audience cheered wildly as Ellen smiled at her. "So, Emma, let me get this straight," Ellen said, leaning forward. "A complete stranger gives you $1 million check, and instead of keeping it all for yourself, you use it to help other people." Emma chuckled nervously. "Yeah, pretty much." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "Okay, I have to ask, why?" Most people would have quit their job, bought a house, and gone on vacation. Emma thought about that for a moment. "I guess I just couldn't. Because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to want something so badly and feel like you'll never get it. And if someone was willing to give me this huge opportunity, then I had to pass it on. It didn't feel right to keep it all to myself." The crowd erupted in applause. Ellen smiled. "Well, Emma, we love what you're doing. So we reached out to some people, and we have a little surprise for you." Emma's stomach twisted with nerves. The screen behind them lit up with the logo of the Gates Foundation. "We spoke with our friends at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation," Ellen said, grinning, "and they love your mission. So they are donating $5 million to your scholarship program to help expand it nationwide." The audience exploded into cheers. Emma's jaw dropped. Tears filled her eyes as she covered her mouth with her hands. "Oh my God." Ellen wasn't done. "And," she continued, "we have one more surprise. Because we know how hard you've been working, we want you to have something for yourself too." The screen changed again, and suddenly, an image of a brand new house appeared. Emma felt her breath catch. "We found you the perfect home," Ellen said warmly. "It's mortgage-free, fully furnished, and ready for you to move in whenever you want." Emma couldn't stop the tears from spilling down her cheeks. Everything felt like a dream. She had started with nothing, a waitress in a diner, just trying to get through the day. And now, she was changing the world, building something bigger. With the Gates Foundation funding, Emma's scholarship program went from a small-town initiative to a national movement. She hired a full team to help manage applications, partnerships, and fundraising. Cities across the country started their own chapters, helping thousands of students pursue education and job training. Emma traveled, speaking at schools and universities, encouraging students who felt stuck to dream bigger. But despite the growth, she still kept her heart in the community where it all started. She made sure Rosie's Diner was taken care of, giving the owner a bonus to renovate the place and helping her old coworkers get access to education if they wanted it. One night, as she was visiting town, she stopped by the diner and found Margaret, the same woman who had once accused her of abandoning them. Margaret was wiping down tables when she spotted Emma. "You again," she said with a smirk. "Too famous for us yet?" Emma laughed. "Never." Margaret shook her head, grinning. "You did good, kid. I was wrong about you." Emma smiled. "Yeah, well, we all need a little push sometimes." Margaret hesitated for a second, then pulled something from her apron pocket. A college acceptance letter. Emma's heart nearly stopped. Margaret sighed, looking at the paper. "I applied to a business program. Figured it's never too late, right?" Emma launched herself at Margaret, hugging her tight. "I am so proud of you." Margaret chuckled. Yeah, don't get all mushy on me." But there were tears in her eyes. Emma knew, in that moment, that this was what it was all about. Not just the money, not just the programs, but giving people hope. A final goodbye. Months passed. Emma was busier than ever, but there was still one thing she had to do. One day, she took a trip out of town, to a quiet seaside estate. She had finally tracked down where James Thompson had retired, the man who had changed her life. When she arrived at his home, a caretaker let her in. James was sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the ocean. He looked older than she remembered, but when he turned, his eyes still held the same warmth. "Emma," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Tears immediately welled in her eyes. "I had to," she whispered. "I needed to tell you, thank you. You gave me a chance when no one else did." James smiled. "No, Emma, you did the work. I just gave you a little push." Emma shook her head. "But why? Why me?" James sighed, his eyes distant. "Many years ago, I was in a position like yours, struggling, and someone helped me. A stranger. He told me the same thing I told you. Pay it forward." Emma covered her mouth, the weight of his words hitting her. "So," he continued, eyes twinkling, "have you?" Emma laughed through her tears. "I think so." James reached out, patting her hand. "Then my job is done." Emma sat with him for hours, telling him everything about the scholarship, the expansion, the people she had helped. When she finally stood to leave, James gave her one last knowing smile. "Keep going, Emma," he said softly. "The world still needs you." She nodded, wiping her tears. And as she walked away, she knew. She wasn't just paying it forward. She was building something that would last forever. The legacy of kindness. Emma stood on the balcony of her new home, looking out at the skyline of a city that had once felt so far away from her small-town life. The air was crisp, the world beneath her humming with life. But inside, she felt something deeper. A sense of purpose. In just over a year, her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. From a waitress at Rosie's Diner to the founder of a national movement, she had watched her scholarship fund grow into something unstoppable. She had gone from serving coffee to serving communities. She had gone from hoping for a better future to creating one. And now she was about to take the biggest step yet. The Carter Foundation. A month after her meeting with Mr. Thompson, Emma made a bold decision. She wasn't just going to fund scholarships. She was going to create a foundation that would permanently change lives, long after she was gone. With the help of financial advisors, legal experts, and passionate volunteers, Emma officially launched the Carter Foundation for Education and Opportunity. Its mission was simple: provide scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds, offer free job training for adults looking for new careers, partner with local businesses to create internship and employment opportunities, Expand free community clinics, offering affordable health care to those in need. Within 6 months, the Carter Foundation had raised an additional $20 million in donations. Every day, new stories poured in. People who had once felt trapped now had a way out. A single mother named Rebecca, who had always dreamed of becoming a nurse, got her degree through the program and was now working in a pediatric clinic. A young man named Jordan, who had been living in his car, found stability after receiving a grant to start his own business. A retired steelworker named Frank, who had given up on education decades ago, had gone back to school and was now teaching apprentices in his field. It was happening. The movement was bigger than Emma now, and she was just getting started. A call from the president. One afternoon, while Emma was in a meeting, her assistant rushed in, looking pale. "You need to take this call," she said, handing Emma the phone. "Who is it?" Emma asked, confused. Her assistant just smiled. "The White House." Emma's heart nearly stopped. She hesitated for a second, then took the phone. "Hello." A warm, confident voice responded. "Miss Carter, this is President Walker. I've been following your work, and I'd love to meet with you." Emma blinked. You want to meet with me?" The president chuckled. "You're changing the country, Emma. We want to talk about how we can help you do even more." A seat at the table. 2 weeks later, Emma found herself in Washington, D.C., sitting at a long conference table surrounded by some of the most powerful people in the country. Cabinet members, education leaders, business executives, all listening to her. A year ago, she had been serving them coffee. Now she was advising them. Emma took a deep breath before speaking. "I know what it's like to feel trapped," she said, her voice steady. "To want a future you don't think you'll ever have. But I also know what happens when someone believes in you. I was just a waitress, working paycheck to paycheck, until someone gave me a chance, and I took that chance and turned it into something bigger. Imagine what we could do if we scaled this nationally. Not just private donations, but actual government-backed support for job training and education." The room was silent. Then, the president smiled. "Emma, I think you just changed the game." Returning home, months passed. Emma's influence grew, her foundation expanded, her programs became nationwide, and her work was recognized across the world. But no matter how far she traveled, she always found herself coming back to the small town where it all began. One afternoon, she returned to Rosie's diner, now fully renovated and thriving. Margaret, now taking night classes, was still working behind the counter. But this time, she wasn't stuck. She was building something for herself. Jimmy was still flipping burgers, but now he had part ownership in the diner, thanks to a business grant from Emma's foundation. Lily, once a nervous teenager waiting tables, was now in her second year of college, training to become a teacher. As Emma sat at the counter, sipping her coffee, a young girl approached her hesitantly. "Miss Carter?" she asked, her voice soft. Emma turned and smiled. "Yes." The girl shifted nervously before holding up a folded piece of paper. I applied for your scholarship. I didn't think I had a chance, but..." She took a deep breath. "I just got accepted into college." Emma's chest tightened with emotion. She reached out and took the girl's hands in hers. "You have more than a chance," Emma said warmly. "You have a future. A life well lived." Years passed. Emma's story became legendary. The Carter Foundation continued to grow, changing millions of lives. People across the country started paying it forward, inspired by the young waitress who turned kindness into a revolution. One day, when Emma was much older, she received a final letter in the mail. It was written in elegant handwriting. "Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds you well. I don't know if you remember me, but years ago, my family sat in your diner, struggling to afford a meal. You paid for it. You left a note, and that note changed everything for us. Today, I am a doctor. My brother is an engineer. My mother is happy and safe. We never forgot you. And now we are paying it forward, just as you asked. Thank you for being the person who reminded us that kindness still exists. With gratitude, a stranger you once helped. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she read the words. She had always believed in the power of one act of kindness, and now that kindness had created ripples across generations. Emma looked out at the world she had helped shape, knowing that she had fulfilled her purpose. Because kindness wasn't just a moment. It was a legacy, and hers would never be forgotten.